so. And Frederick was kind of an interesting person because he was born of a fairly well-to-do family in New York City. They weren't suffering for any money. They were nominal Christians. Christmassy and Easter kind of people. And anyway, he decided that he wanted to be a writer. And he'd actually written a couple of novels and was doing fairly well, although he really didn't need the money. And one day he decided, for whatever reason, to go into Riverside Church in New York City. And I don't know why he did it. He doesn't even know why he did it himself. But the great preacher Harry Emerson Fosdick was preaching. And during that sermon, Fosdick said words that Buechner never forgotten. He said that God meets us in our tears, in our fears, and in our great laughter. Now those words blew Buechner off, and he he just realized he had to get to know this God better. So he decided then and there he was going to go into seminary. He came back all excited to his family's house, and his parents were less enthused than he was. His great aunt, when she heard the news, said, "Did you decide this on yourself, or were you poorly informed?" That's that's how badly that response was. But anyway, he went into the ministry, became an ordained Presbyterian pastor, and soon became known for his preaching, his teaching, and his writing. He wrote many books. Some of them were just publishing his sermons, but other books were on different aspects of the Bible that interested him. And one of the books that was interested him, or one of the things that interested him, were the people that populated the Bible. He wrote a book called Peculiar Treasures. And in the foreword of that book, he says that he wrote this book in order to dust off these old creatures from the Bible and to bring them up to the modern day. And he said, lo and behold, what he found out was that these old creatures, these old people, actually dusted him off. They dusted off the cobwebs that he was containing about that he could learn nothing about the Bible or learn nothing about God from them. He himself was dusted off by these peculiar treasures. Our Old Testament lesson for today, our first lesson, actually gives us 12 of these peculiar treasures of God. There's Jacob, also known as Israel, the one who cheats his brother Esau out of his fortunes, the one who cheats his brother Esau out of his final blessing by his father, and who eventually reconciles with Esau. Then, on top of that, there are 11 sons. 10 of them from 10 of Jacob's sons were from his first wife, uh, Leah, who he really didn't love but had to marry in order to he could marry his second wife. So 10 of the children came from Leah and her concubines, and the last one, Joseph, was from Rachel, the wife that Jacob really loved and was willing to work twice as hard to get as a wife. Well, you can imagine because of this, Joseph was Jacob's favorite. And it wasn't just a sly favorite, it was a very obvious favorite. Now, if you're born into a family of more than one, if you're not just a single child, if you have siblings, you know that there is certainly such a thing as sibling rivalry. And despite our parents' best efforts to say it doesn't make a difference, believe me, it does. I'm a middle child, I can tell you. So certainly here, all the sons were aware of who stood where. It was very obvious that Joseph was a favorite, not by a short bit, but by a long mile. Nobody else came even close. He was such a favorite that his father gives him a special piece of clothing. Now, if you're old enough to have read this in this lesson in the King James Version, you'll know that the coat that Joseph is given is a coat of many colors. That's what that translation was. Or if you're old enough to know Andrew Lloyd Webber, uh, musical Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Other versions, other translations say that this was uh, a, uh, a rather ostentatious coat, or you can even say a gaudy coat. Whatever it was, this coat was loud and brash and says to everybody in the world, I'm number one. I'm the best. Now you can imagine what that did. As a matter of fact, the Bible even tells us that what that did was cause a lot of contention between Joseph and his brothers. Therefore, we find that when the brothers go out in the fields, Joseph hangs back. His father doesn't really send him out in the fields very much with his brothers because of this tension. But one day, Jacob says to Joseph, find out how your brothers are doing out in the fields. And so Joseph goes willingly out to find his brothers. And when his brothers see him from afar off, after all, remember, he has this gaudy coat that everybody can see for miles. When they see him, they say to themselves, let's get rid of him and get rid of the problems that he's giving us. Because not only was he given this gaudy coat, but also, as we find in other verses, he's been dreaming a lot. And in his dreams, the brothers bow down before him. And he's foolish enough to tell his brothers that. Talk about not really understanding your part in life. And so the brothers conspire to get rid of him. Fortunately, the oldest, Reuben, says, let's not kill him. Let's put him down in this pit and pretend that wild animals is taking him, and we'll tell Dad that. Now, we're told that Reuben said that so that when the other brothers had fallen asleep, he could get Joseph out of the pit and send him back to Dad. But instead, before he could do that, some traders from Midian came. And the brothers say, oh, look, we won't kill him, but let's sell him as a slave. And this is what they do. And this is how our story for today ends. Well, if the story ended that way, what have we learned? Number one, we've certainly learned that there is such a thing as sibling rivalry, and that if you're a relative, even a close relative, there's no guarantee that you'll have kindness, thoughtfulness, let alone love from siblings. Siblings are capable of cruelty, jealousy, arrogance, and a lack of care for one another. Even good neighbors sometimes argue about fences, about politics, you name it. We can be fractious people. That's perhaps one learning we can learn from this. Another learning that we can learn perhaps of this is the world we live in is not very nice. There's one of Murphy's laws says the race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but that's the way to bet. Life is short, brutish, and life is nasty, brutish, and short, said Thomas Hobbes in his book Leviathan, where he argues that because life is so nasty, brutish, and short, the world needs a strong, authoritative leader to hold everybody in check. Ray Kroc, the founder, not the founder, but the person who made McDonald's what it is from a small, humble beginnings as a small local shop in California to the worldwide corporation is today, had a saying that the world is dog eat dog, rat eat rat, And if somebody is drowning, put a fire hose down their throat. That's the kind of world that Ray Kroc thought we should live in. It's dog eat dog, so get yours before anybody else does. And in his 1973 book, The Trouble with Being Born, the Romanian philosopher Emil Cioran argued that evil is the only active driving force in the world. Evil is the only active driving force in the world. With all of that, we might be saying to ourselves, if you can't beat them, join them. If everybody else is going to be that way, we might as well be that way. Fortunately, the Bible does not leave things there. In next Sunday's lesson, Joseph will reconcile himself with his brothers, and I'll leave Reverend Leah to work with that if she wants to. But further ahead, even further down in chapter 50, we see Joseph and his brothers once more getting together. Their father has died, and the brothers are afraid that Joseph, now that the buffer, dad, is gone, that Joseph is going to torment them again after all they did to him. But after the funeral is over, the brothers ask Joseph to just take them as his slaves rather than slaying them. And Joseph says these words: "As for you, you meant evil against me," he says. I can't tell you whether he said it matter of fact or pointedly, but certainly words that should have chilled his brothers down the spine. What will he do? But he continues, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about the fact that many people should be kept alive. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Seeing life in that way changes its dynamic. Sure, the world may be, in some respects, dog eat dog, rat eat rat. Somebody's trying to put a hose down their throat. But that's not what God calls us to do. And that, in fact, is not what God is doing. So, therefore, we do not get weary or discouraged. Time after time, the Bible lifts up good over evil, love over hate. Nothing is final until God says it's final. The world might seem overwhelmingly dark, and yet we know there is always a dawn behind it. This story of Joseph, the brash, peculiar treasure, the one who flaunts his coat and tells all about the dreams where he's going to rule the world, is also the one by whom God saves the world after he's been humbled in slavery. Perhaps he himself needed that little bit of humbling to realize all the problems that all humans go through. In 1999, I had the pleasure of meeting Desmond Tutu. I was at a gathering of college students and college chaplains. We did that every 4 years. And we normally did it at a retreat center during the winter between Christmas and New Year's because A, the retreat centers are pretty cheap during that time, and B, that's the time when you could get the most college students together at one place at one time. So we met in the mountains of North Carolina at a retreat center there. I think it was run by the Methodists, doesn't really matter. But at the retreat center, Desmond Tutu was speaking, and he was there about 9 years after apartheid had been ended, about 5 years after Desmond, after, sorry, thank you, Desmond, sorry, Nelson Mandela had taken over as the head, and And Tutu had started this reconciliation commission. And during the reconciliation commission, Tutu had himself been jailed and rather poorly abused under the apartheid system. This reconciliation, commission, Tutu said, was really what it was supposed to be: finding ways of reconciling people that were formerly enemies and bring them together into the mind of Christ. He knew the cost of suffering, but did not grow cynical. He knew the problems that life could bring, and yet, by the same time, he knew of God's love and reconciliation, which would break through the world because of Christ. That's what he spoke about that day. And I had a chance to speak to him about that. And you could just tell it wasn't just words for him. And that's exactly how he meant. God is reconciling the world, even in the darkest time. I've asked you to hold your book or keep your white folder near you. If you'll turn to number 18. Number 18, good is stronger than evil. At the same year that Desmond Tutu came to speak to the college students in over Christmas, he had just written his African prayer book. Now, he was Anglican, and so the idea of prayer book was central to him. And after all, we have the Book of Common Prayer. And this book, the African Prayer Book, was in addition to that, the prayers of the people from an African context. One of them was entitled, Victory is Ours. And this poem that he wrote, this prayer that he wrote, later became put to music and is seen in the hymnal you have there right in front of you. So look at it while I'm saying it. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Victory is ours through him who loves us. Victory is ours through him who loves us. This is what God is like. God comes to us in goodness, in love, in light, and yes, even as Frederick Buechner heard, God comes to us in peals of laughter. Evil is never the end. God's goodness and love always wins. Amen.